Welcome, golf fans, pursuers of knowledge in the almighty dollar. This is your golf guru bringing you the 2023 PGA Championship. This is my Before the Lock show where I'm going to update ownership projections. I've got some new models that I ran for you guys, looking at the wind, looking at who can play out of the rough, looking at the guys that are the best at driving it the furthest, and of course hitting the fairways. Yes, we're going to have a Jordan Spieth update. Going to talk through all this information to get you ready to lock in those final lineups, maybe give you some last thoughts on who you might want to bet. And with all that said, thank you for stopping by. Give me only like 25 minutes. We'll get through all this information and let's go talk a little golf. All right, so real quick, let's talk about Jordan. I'm sure you've been seeing all the tweets or if you've been watching the Golf Channel. Of course, as I mentioned, he made it on site yesterday, had a full practice session. I believe what I heard was he played 9 holes and pulled out of the last hole, but from everything you're going to be hearing that I've been seeing, it looks like he's going to play. He's going to announce later today on Wednesday, have a presser. My guess is that he will give it a go, but it's a little terrifying if he, hypothetically, as we know, Jordan typically gets himself into some precarious positions, if you want to say, and typically doesn't, is going to be hitting out of the rough a lot. Some of those crazy sand shots. So for me personally, I probably will stay off him. Maybe I'll throw a lineup in. We'll look at the ownership of Jordan in this show just to see where he's at. Last time I think I looked, he was around 5-6%. But of course, he is going for the Grand Slam, and I'm sure he thinks every year missed is an opportunity, which technically it is. So that is the update that I have. Again, I'm keeping my eyes on the Golf Channel and the Twitter sphere, and I've seen nothing else. Like I said, there were some conflicting reports, but everything I've heard is positive. And of course, you can see that he's got that tape on there to try to help and protect that he doesn't do any further damage. All right, so there's been, of course, the other topic. I think the main one has been the course. The next one, of course, is the weather. And right now, if you've been, again, watching the Golf Channel, it is a bit chilly there, even here in northern Michigan. We're at least 50 degrees, but the biggest thing that I will call out that I was looking at is, of course, these frost warnings. And when you go on Wind Finder, actually, it says there's a chance around 7 a.m. it'll be around 33 degrees again. So here it's saying 49. Again, this is coming from the PGA. But that's the big issue is the delays. And then if you look at the weather for Thursday, it looks perfect after that. Looks like the guys will probably get off around 10 or 11 o'clock. And if anybody's curious, why did they delay the golf? If it's colder, well, of course, frost on this grass, if you take a divot, it can permanently kill the root systems, which any of you out there that golf up in the Midwest would know that it's never fun when you pull up to the course and you see frost. You know it's going to be a bit of a wait. So it's kind of hard to sit there and try to look at, is there any flight advantages? Of course, tee times are out, came out yesterday. Everything that I see, not really, because what's going to happen, I think, is, of course, if you're playing in colder weather, the ball does not fly as far. And so people would be like, oh, well, I'm going to take, the later slate. But honestly, I think those guys probably not going to tee off till around, again, 11 o'clock Eastern, which then really there's no flight advantages and there's really no wind per se that is anything to talk about on Thursday. And then we're not really sure, again, if there's going to be another delay on Friday morning. So really from a flight advantage, it's nothing I'm looking into. But the other thing I said is we are going to see quite a bit of wind on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I think that's the main things I wanted to point out weather, but of course we'll go look at Wind Finder, where you want to pull your information from if you're playing Showdown or just keeping an eye on things. All right, so more and more as I've kind of looked at this course, the more that we've heard conversations. I was already adding this in, but I wanted to I always kind of do this after my first initial models. I'll do kind of more of a very restrained, simplified model that is really focusing on, the areas that it looks like the way the course is going to play. And it's pretty rare that you'll hear a first shot course. It's always typically here, this is a second shot course, that approach is king. But in this instance, everything keeps telling us that it's going to be a first shot course. And what does that mean? That the guys that hit it the longest in the most fairways are going to have the best chance of winning. And then you've also heard, a lot of the players say it reminds them a lot of Winged Foot. Of course, that's where the U.S. Open was. We talked a little bit about this yesterday, where DeChambeau and also Wolf, Matthew Wolf, did very well because they didn't care about the depth of the rough. But that rough was a bit different. The blades of grass here, from what I can see, are really thick, which again, I don't think you're going to be able to get it out as well. Now, again, you have advantage if you're hitting, as I mentioned yesterday, a pitching wedge versus somebody hitting a 6-iron. That is a huge advantage. So with all that said, what I wanted to do for you guys and myself was to run some models that really focused on driving distance and fairways gained. Now, another thing that was stated was, well, the reason why you also want to look at guys with distance is because even the guys that typically hit it, let's say 280, 290, who hit a ton of fairways, because these fairways are so narrow and they kind of canter off, that even if you hit the fairway a lot of times because they're also firm, that they're going to run off and you're going to be in the rough. Hence, again, what does it matter? You just want the distance. So we'll see how that all plays out. As I mentioned, I was kind of in the field of, I'm going to build some different lineups, some with the guys that hit it very long and also have the other things. But also I was looking at the guys that typically will hit a ton of fairways and good with that 200-yard approach, and that's what I've done. And also my picks kind of reflected that. Okay, with all that said, if you are curious, looking at the past 36 rounds, I took a little larger sample, so this would get into the fall season, back like with the CJ Cup, the Zozo, the Houston Open, just to give you kind of a mind frame of where this data would be coming from, of course, all the way up to the Byron Nelson. Against this model, putting 25% on distance weighted, 25% on fairways gained. So that's 50% focused on the tee shot. Then I still want to keep in some other weighting, so 10% on approach, 10% on that 200 plus, and then I added that 175 to 200 at 10%. What that does for me is gives me usually a good showing of good ball strikers, guys that are good at the long distance approach shots. And then, of course, that putting, which should be crucial, typically shows up in majors, the guys that can make those 7-8 footers. And then around the green, as we saw, again, these are smaller greens. There's a lot of runoffs. There's the thick rough if you go on the other side of the green. So on one side, you might have the tight mown runoff areas. And then on the other, you could have the very roughy sand area. So anyways, all I said, no shocker still. Scotty Scheffler comes up number 1, Patrick Cantlay, John Rahm, Tony Finau, and then I mentioned Brendan Steele. If you see this little star highlighted, that means they are on the Live Tour, and the data could be a little older. But Brendan Steele, the data is still pretty fresh. And the one thing, that he was doing very well was tee to green. It was just he kind of fell apart on the putting and around the green. You got JT, Gary Woodland, Jason Day, Max Homa, Justin Rose, Xander Schauffele, Mito Pereira, Shane Lowry, Terrell Hatton, and then, of course, Rory coming at the end. And if you're saying, well, why is Rory so low? As I kind of talked about in the show yesterday, he's dropped on his fairways hit and it's down to around 50%. And then I wanted to do one more thing. If you were just like, well, just tell me the guys that, forget all the other things, just are the elite with distance and hitting fairways. That's what this model is showing you. You're going to see everything zeroed out over here. And now 50% of the weighting is on distance, 50% on the fairways. And it's still pretty similar. You got Scheffler number 1, Cantlay number 2. Hayden Buckley moves up, Steele's there number 4. Victor Hovland, Woodland, Hatton, Killer Keith, which, if you know Killer Keith, he does hit the ball very long and straight off the tee. It's kind of everything else that can cause some issues at time. Shane Lowry, Thomas Detry, Minwoo Lee, John Rahm, Tony Finau, Tom Kim, which that's kind of interesting. You can see that he's 94 in distance, but hits a lot of fairways. Cameron Young and Joaquin Niemann, again, another live player, and Jason Day. So again, that's kind of just purely all the weighting is focused off the tee shot. Okay, so there is another filter that, I typically never use, but I thought, hey, why not? We are looking at very high rough. And so there is a filter that you can select the different lengths of rough, if you want to say. And so I was just curious. I ran that through against that model again, back with the weighting. This is the kind of what I call the first shot model, but still it's got the approach, procs, putting, and around the green. And it comes up looking at the last 24 rounds of golf. Of course, that'd be the last 6 tournaments. Patrick Cantlay actually comes up number 1. Justin Rose, Brendan Steele still hanging up there. Xander Schauffele, Scotty Scheffler, Finau, Niemann, Hovland, Taylor Pendrith, my buddy Emiliano Grillo. Don't worry about that. He is still on the PGA Tour. I'm not sure why that's highlighted. Maybe it was just for my picks yesterday. You got Rory McIlroy, Max Homa, Taylor Moore, who just got in the field due to the withdrawal, I believe, of Paul Casey. Justin Thomas and Kurt Kitayama, if you are curious. And so if you're thinking, well, what kind of courses are you talking about here? That'd be like the Arnold Palmer, the API. There was quite the high rough, typically is. Actually, the Players showed up as tough rough. So just kind of letting you know just some examples of where these guys have played recently that had some high rough. All right, and then one of the requests was, hey, can you help us out with the wind side? And I said, yeah, no problem. Now, I pulled up the last 12 rounds, and you got to remember this is a filter within Fantasy National, and it is windy AF. So this is like 20 mile an hour up. Is that where this is pulling from? And so there's not a ton of rounds that these guys have played. Like I said, I think of, I don't know, the Players maybe was the last. There's, been, but just so you know why there's only a sample size of this, it's still pulling probably back 2 years or a year and a half of different rounds that they played in crazy winds. And again, against that model, the more simplified, looking at heavy weighting off the tee, which this and I checked this because I kind of know the guys that typically do well. Tony Finau, number one, Victor Hovland. Whenever you get really good ball strikers, they typically do fare well. Like a Sungjae Im, you'll see here. Adam Hadwin was kind of interesting. But Max Homa, Scotty Scheffler, of course, Texan. Tom Hoge, a Texan. John Rahm, again, just an amazing ball striker. JT. Trey Mullinax pops up there. Keegan Bradley, makes sense. Corey Connors, great ball striker. Woodland, Jordan Spieth, and Xander. And then I also know Harris English was just kind of below. I just wanted to throw that in there as I have that as a bet, but I also know that he can handle the wind. And then I wanted to bring this up too for the wind side because, hey, that was against that model I created. Well, just about what do we want to look at? Just stroke gain data. Who's got the best strokes gain in all the different categories in the crazy wind? So that's, tee to green, ball striking, short game off the tee, approach, around the green, and then putting, and then DK points. You guys might ask why I never pull in DK points because I've never made sense of it. And Tony Finau, number one, Keegan, Sungjae Im, Cam Smith pops up there. Of course, Live Data, Tom Hoge, Hadwin, Justin Thomas, Homa, Corey Connors, Rahm. There's Harris English I was talking about. Patrick Reed, Bobby McIntyre has one less round in crazy win. Abe Answer, a guy that I was interested in on playing, and I've also bet. And then Scotty Scheffler. And so all those names look really good to me. Guys that do typically fare, and guys that can hit the knockdowns, or really good ball strikers, or their ball flight does tend to fare well in windier conditions. Okay, let's jump out. We'll go look at ownership projections, weather, and then get you guys out of here. Okay, so I've updated the ownership projections, as in I pulled in the latest and greatest data. It's almost double of what I showed yesterday. I wanted to show yesterday just in case I didn't have time to do today's show, but I did have a few minutes to put this together for you. So we're at 10,600 lineups. That's a great source of data. And again, as I always mention, we want to focus over here. These are actual lineups created. There's calculated projected ownership, and then there's actual created lineups that went into DraftKings. I always use the far right side. And your two top runners right now is John Rahm and Xander, both around 20-21%. And then you got like this yellow area here. You got Finau, Hatton, Fleetwood, Fowler, Clark, Scheffler, Cantlay. And then when we get down below 15%, Gary Woodland, M, Fitzy, JT, Adam Scott, DJ. And you might ask me why DJ didn't show up on any of those kind of longest drivers / fairways. I looked at that because I was curious. He definitely is like 8th in distance, but that data that was pulling pre-live, he was brutal when it came to hitting the fairway. He was like 130th in the field. So I just wanted to throw that in there. You got Jason Day, Soo Kim, Max Homa around 11% now. Rory, of course, could be your pivot play at 10% up top. You got Rose, who I like, Neiman, Matsuyama. Brooks Koepka, funny enough, has fallen a bit out of favor. I'm guessing that has a lot to do with that price tag. I mean, again, for the Masters, we were getting them in, I think around 8,800, 8,900 was definitely a lot easier to swallow than, trying to make a choice between Koepka and, I don't know, Xander, or you've got, I want to say Scheffler because he's almost like 1,000 above. But I mean, when you make that pick at 10, 11,000, you're that's going to really affect how you can build your lineup going forward. Gooch looks like he's getting some more steam. You got Cameron Young, Keegan, Lowry, Reed, all in there. And then I said I was going to look. What I wanted to look for you guys was where Spieth's ownership is right now. Yeah, around 5%. So I'd be curious once he announces if he's going to play now that that changes, because I think it's a risky, I don't know. I would just be it might affect, even if he makes all 4 rounds. Let's say he makes the cut. Hypothetically, it's still going to affect his play, and it's probably going to get worse as we see with the Tiger effect as the weekend approaches. But also the WD would literally just sink your lineup. So it's going to be interesting where guys go. Like I said, I'm probably just a full fade on Spieth. Would I maybe put one lineup together? Maybe. I don't know. We'll have to see how that comes in. Go look at some of the cheaper plays. I think Thomas Peters could be a little interesting just from a distance off the tee perspective. Same with Ryan Fox. I already told you guys I'm going to take some risk with Aaron Wise just because of how low his ownership is. Of course, Paul Casey withdrew yesterday from the tournament. Kurt Kitayama, there's a guy that won an elevated event. We know he's pretty elite off the distance side and also can handle the rough. So kind of interesting. He's only at 1.2. Again, just looking for some guys that you could kind of pivot. Taylor Montgomery's got the distance and just a crazy putter. The problem with him is typically doesn't hit a lot of fairways and also kind of struggles with the irons. You put Matt McNeely right in that boat, but just elite putters. I've always said these guys' games have mirrored each other this season. All right, Trey Mullinax got some of that elite distance you've been looking for. Joel Damon, one thing that he does do very well, he can play to win, right? He won, I think it was Corrales, and so he could definitely handle the win, and he just hits a ton of fairways. And he popped up, I think it was the U.S. Open where he challenged, but man, I get confused now back looking if it was the PGA or the U.S. Open. I think I got the power to be able to click on him and find out that answer for us. So let's go look where he had a good finish at one of the majors. All right, it was the U.S. Open last year. Also showed up at the PGA in 2020, but yeah, he actually led, I think, the first couple rounds. Or was right up there. And again, that's actually coming from remembering the Netflix show. Who else? Substraka, funny enough, when I think of him, I think of, yes, he's got distance, but he has won in some different cool conditions, right? The Honda. It's always, for some reason, it seems like it's windy for the Honda. Padre Harrington, I don't know if he's withdrawn, but I was seeing that he pulled, I think, some rib cartilage. He's dealing with some physical issues, we'll put it that way. So just cautious. I heard some of the guys talking about betting him for the senior kind of, best senior finish. So I'd watch that. Matthew Neesmith, always a great ball striker. Nick Harding. All right, I think that's probably enough. It gives you a good understanding of where the ownership is falling. There's Jimmy Walker, which really was interesting. Of course, Jimmy's been playing pretty decent golf for Jimmy Walker, and he does have distance and fairways. It was the issue again around the green and the putting. Adrian Meronk, I mentioned, he's got elite distance, just won on the DP World Tour. That was the Italian Open. DeChambeau, I think he had a pretty decent showing at Tulsa. I don't know where he finished, but, I was just hearing him kind of some conversations and that his game's getting a little bit back, but of course, probably doesn't have that same elite distance. When I clicked on who had the longest, number one longest distance guys, he popped up, but we all know that was kind of older data. But of course, won the API, won Winged Foot, but a little different body style at that time. There's my buddy Adam Svensson, less than 5% still, kind of interested in him. Cam Davis, he's a good one to take a shot on as just an elite ball striker. Also, of course, comes from Australia, good out of the sand, can handle the wind. Someone that you might think of, Brendan Steele, I showed quite a bit, of course, just terrible around the green and putting. Then Harris English, my buddy, plugging him in quite a bit when I get down in that range. And Kuchar, I'm going to take a shot on him just because of the elite skills around the green, and he'll kind of fit into that model of, hitting a ton of fairways, pretty decent from the 200 out. I mean, I think the models were showing that, but I go on what I know. That was kind of recent form. Russ Henley, of course, Hayden Buckley, elite distance. Russ Henley falls under the Kuchar of hits a ton of fairways, good with the irons. It's just what can he do around the greens and on them. Okay. Let's go look at weather real quick. And if you are going to be playing Showdown, of course, this is what you're going to want to pull. Rochester Airport was probably, about 5-10 miles away from the course. Looks like where these guys, again, would fly into if they are taking the private and not the commercial. And we don't know really need to worry about Wednesday. But Thursday, as I mentioned, everything looks fine. I mean, as you can see, sunny, calm. They are worried about the weather, this 37 degrees here at 7 a.m. I believe tee times. Well, I've also have the ability. Okay, so I just wanted to check what time these guys are actually pegging it up, and it's at 7 a.m. So that would hit right here. So yeah, there looks like there could be a possibility of frost. If not, away they'll go. But when you get into the Friday, and again, I'm looking at the super forecast, you can kind of see, again, it's kind of equal, it says, for everybody. So no real advantages there. And then if I go to where we can look out the 4-day forecast, let's go to Friday. So this is what I was seeing. yeah, right around here, still in the 30s at 7 a.m. And then, of course, the winds. There could be some rain at nighttime. Hopefully that, doesn't affect, might soften the course up, which, again, the distance will even, again, more, and, the distance will be more prevalent that you're going to need it to be successful, at least everything that we are seeing. And then Sunday, still got some wind. So, okay, that's it. That's all I really wanted to cover with you guys. Let's jump out and I'll wrap this thing up. All right, once again, guys, thanks for spending some time with me. I hope, again, that helps you out. A little bit more additional information from the modeling perspective. Also got you an updated ownership projections. We looked at weather, talked that through. We'll see what Jordan says later today. Again, if I was a betting man, which I am, I'd bet that he is going to give it a go. And as always, if you do me the honor, click that like button, share this with anybody else that is doing the golf thing on the fantasy tip, and subscribe if you've not subscribed, and follow me on Twitter at DFS Golf Guru, where I give you all the updates, everything that I'm seeing, or anything kind of funny that I will tweet it out for you guys. All right, guys, have an amazing PGA Championship. Enjoy it. The good news is it's not Mother's Day this weekend, so we can maybe spend a little more time watching the golf. All right, guys, take care, and I'll talk to you next Monday.